Okay, we're playing black against Akshay 2010, 1210, and he goes d4. Now, you guys want to see a King's Indian? Let's go knight f6 and then decide what we're going to do. We can do a King's Indian. We can do a Nimzo-Indian. Now, a Nimzo-Indian is an opening that flies under the radar a lot of the time. The Benoni, Grunfeld, there's a lot of good openings that I could expose you guys to. Even the Budapest is good. But let's play positionally. Let's play a Nimzo-Indian e6. And hopefully he goes knight c3. By the way, one misconception. Knight c3, bishop e4 is the Nimzo-Indian. Any other move does not technically allow us to play the Nimzo-Indian per se. And that's why we'll have to play the Queen's Indian setup with the Bogo Indian. He goes to e3, which is very passive. It's not bad. I mean, it's a solid move, right? That's the pawn. But it blocks in the bishop. And one good companion setup to the Nimzo-Indian is the Queen's Indian setup. The Queen's Indian setup being the move b6. The actual Queen's Indian is knight f3 b6. This is an even better version of it. Now, why might you ask, should we not give a check on b4? Well, the thing to understand is that bishop b4 is most effective in response to knight c3. If we give a check here, it's not bad, but he can simply go bishop d2, and then we don't have the same possibility of capturing that knight on c3 and ruining his structure. So instead, I propose the move b6. It would also have been possible to go d5, transposing into a favorable queen's gambit to client. Fianchettoing the bishop. And look at the nice control we have over the e4 square. Now, how should we proceed developmentally? Nothing particularly crazy here. We should control the center a little bit with pawns, the move being d5. And I think d5 is a great opportunity to talk about what I would call the bishop as an extension of a pawn. Or, sorry, the other way around. Pawn is an extension of the bishop. The move d5 might grate on... it might be a little bit of an eyesore for some people, right? Red Dragon and Reggae Speedway, thank you for the subs. Because you look at this move and you say, well, doesn't it block in the bishop? Doesn't it counteract the whole point of bishop b7? Well, it does from the point of view that it restricts the bishop temporarily. But if you think about what the overall idea is, which is to control central squares, the bishop acts, and this is what I mean, the pawn acts simply as an extension of the bishop. If we put something on e4 later, and that thing on e4 is captured, let's say we put a knight, and then we recapture with a pawn, you guys should see that the bishop will then be defending that pawn. In addition, we obviously can take on c4 and reopen the diagonal. In fact, that would be one of the best moves here. But let's not rush with that. Let's complete our development. Where should this bishop go? What do you guys think? C5 is possible, but not strictly necessary. Bishop d6 would be a beautiful square. And now our bishops are aimed at white's king. So let's make a mental note to ourselves to check various tactics once we start developing. Okay. So let's castle. And let's recapture with a pawn. Now we've got very nice central control here. Bishop to d3. So ideas. Well, maybe he's preparing e4, but that's not a threat yet because we've got 1, 2, 3 defenders on the square and only 2 attackers. Now, how should we position our pieces here? This knight on b8 should not go on c6. That's a big no-no because it blocks in the c-pawn, as you guys know, and it blocks the bishop even further. It should definitely go to b7, to d7. Now, in such situations, also the move a6 is often very effective at stopping potential knight b5 ideas. Knight b5 is not dangerous here because the bishop can drop to e7, then we go a6, and it comes back to d6. But later on, for example, if white's queen is on c2, knight b5 becomes a much more dangerous idea because if the bishop drops to e7, then c7 might fall. Now, we could go a6, but let's think for a second about what our opponent wants. Our opponent perhaps wants to play e4, opening up the center. That's not such a dangerous idea, but I don't really want to allow all of these trades. I really don't. So let's start with the move rook e8, increasing our clamp on the e4 square, discouraging white from going e4, just to make it difficult for white to breathe. Hope this is all making sense so far. I realize this is a position which may be unfamiliar to a lot of you, and that's a good thing. You know, hopefully when you get exposed to these positions, you see that the logic isn't all that crazy. He goes queen c2, good play by our opponent. Now, as you guys can see, knight b5 becomes a serious positional threat because it would necessitate us giving up the bishop, but we have a way to deal with it, and we don't have to play a6. We have a more active move, which some of you guys have been suggesting for a long time now. What am I talking about here? This is a move which not only takes the sting out of knight b5, but also increases our, turns up the temperature dial on the center. We are ready to play c5 now that everything is developed. This is a good time to play c5. Knight b5, we can just drop the bishop back to b8. That's what I love about such moves. It's the fact that it creates this escape square for the bishop, and we don't even move the bishop from the sexy diagonal that it's on. Now, obviously, we want to take with the pawn, just to keep the integrity of our central pawns, and he shouldn't have done that. Now we have d4 ideas, which may come with devastating effect, opening up this bishop. Potential energy, ladies and gentlemen. This is why it's such an important concept. Potential energy of the bishop is super high. It might still seem pretty lame, but it could win us the game. In fact, it probably will. All right, guys, the potential tactics in this position are through the roof. But let's be calm. Let's be methodical. What should we do? Now, what should we consider? What's the first move we should consider? Well, as I just indicated, we should definitely consider. Now, queen c7 is a good move, generally speaking, but it does fall into knight b5, picking off this important bishop. We should definitely consider the move d4. Now, let's calculate. d4, e takes d4. Okay. So d4, e takes d4, what do we notice about the position as a result? Well, now the rooks are in a standoff. White's rook is defended by the knight. So one thing that comes to mind is play d4, e takes d4, and now what move logically stems from our observation that the rook is defended by the knight? Well, bishop takes f3. Okay, so if you're following the line, d4 takes, bishop takes f3. If he takes the bishop, what do we do in that position? And everybody can visualize this. That's my point. Well, that drops the rook. So he has to take our rook, but what happens then? What do we gain from that? And we're going to play this. We can play queen takes e8 and occupy the open file and then give him a pretty nasty looking check on e1. So that would be one way of playing. That doesn't end. That's not mate because the king's going to have g2. Remember that when you take the knight, he takes gf. That does create a little luft for the king. So I wouldn't rush to do that. I would consider the other candidate moves, perhaps trying to find something even more convincing. And I'm actually looking right now. Thank you, Bachutato. Yeah, the space opening up is important to notice for sure. Unacceptable, Sky. Get out of the stream. Okay. Thank you, T for Pioka Lamo. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, man. Tanya with the humor. He's so funny. But I have something crazy to tell you, folks. I propose that we play a move that's perhaps very few of you are considering because it's so anticlimactic. And yet, at a very high level, at a Grandmaster level, such moves are often... Well, first we're going to take the rook, and I'll explain everything after it. Because we're low on time, I want to play this a little bit faster, and then simply c takes d4. Sometimes the simplest continuation can be the strongest because it's the easiest to evaluate and it keeps all of the pluses of the position. Think about it this way. When you have all of these active pieces, you're looking for ways to play. You have all of this potential energy and you're transferring into kinetic energy by taking on F3 and doing all of this stuff. You want to make sure that you're not cashing in too soon. Here, we're keeping all of our pieces as active as possible because what I'm going to try to find is some sort of a knockout blow. I wasn't too satisfied by taking on F3. I think that was more complicated than it looked. What I'm trying to see here, can we straight away do something devastating? Let's start with bringing our rook into the game with rook to c8. The Greek gift doesn't work, or maybe it does actually. We'll see. Let's start with this. I don't think there's a downside to this. Now we need to consider the Greek gift. So takes, knight g4, queen h4. Bishop f4. Okay, so let's calculate. Takes, check. Let's say he drops back, queen h4, bishop f4, defending the h2 square. Do we have anything in that position, folks? Visualize, visualize, visualize. We do. Takes, knight g4, king g1. Queen takes f2. That pawn on f2 is undefended because the knight on e2 blocks the queen's defense of it. So this is complicated. I have a sense that perhaps white has some sort of a reputation here, but it's a good practical choice. I think with full due respect, at a 1400 level, it's going to be tremendously difficult for somebody to refute this. Check. And dropping in the queen. Oh, but he does have something I missed. But it's still good for us. He does have a way to defend this pawn. Now, the point is, this is not checkmate. Queen h2, queen h1 might seem like mate, but it's not, because that knight could slide on over to g1, and in doing so, create an escape square on e2 for the king. But, oh, no, that's not what I was thinking, but knight g3 is good. Okay, now this guy's playing really well. We need to bring some stuff in. Now give me a second to think here. Now we can give him a check and go king f1. Yeah, rook e8 is what I was thinking of. Let's go rook e8. Let's bring the rook back into the game. Yeah, now it gets complicated. No, this guy's definitely out-calculating me here. So let's see. This is super complicated position. There's some beautiful ideas. I'll fill you guys in on everything afterward, but hopefully you can excuse me for calculating here. There are some incredible tactical ideas here. He disconnected. Okay. So what's the idea of rook e8? The idea is simply to transfer the rook and attack the knight, but that's not the only idea. The main idea is to make sure that the rook controls the e2 square. Why is that important? The reason that is important is because I'm afraid that the king will eventually make a mad dash to the center, and I want to make sure that if that happens, this rook on e8 doesn't allow that to happen. Does that make sense? Okay, so he goes there. That looks like a mistake. That looks like a mistake. But I can't exactly refute it. Man. This dude. 1 second. Okay. Let's bring... Let's give him a check. Let's give him a check. And then let's bring this knight on d7. It's not doing anything. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort. We need every piece involved, every piece participating. Let's get this knight involved. If that makes sense. This is a super interesting and very instructive position that can show you how tactical chess can become. We have some incredible ideas here in our camp. And he's got some amazing defensive ideas in his. I'm trying to get a hold of them, but they're very difficult to understand everything here. This is super cool, guys. There's so I'm looking at a stunning line, but I'll fill you guys in on it shortly. Don't worry, I'm not cheating. So what we're threatening here is to take and go knight f3. That's one thing we're threatening. Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm gonna knock your socks off with a line here. I hope he goes something like queen b4. Oh, there's an absolutely incredible idea. But only if he gets his queen out away, which I don't think he will. Oh my god, guys, this is beautiful. Oh, nobody wants to go anywhere, trust me. Trust me, you will find this idea stunning. Okay, bishop e2. Now, wait a minute. Let me think. Knight f3. I'm thinking. Oh my god. Yeah, I like d3. Let's go d3. Yeah, d3, of course. d3 is the most obvious move, but it's not the most beautiful. I wanted to find something more beautiful, but it is what it is. Just forcing him just to do something. This is poggers. We had an insane draw, guys. Oh my goodness, this is super exciting business. Now, I have to take my hat off for this guy. He is playing out of his mind. And he takes, which is correct, I think. We take. He takes the sting out of a lot of these attacking opportunities now that he's taken a knight. Which is very unfortunate, but it is what it is. Oh god, that's correct, I think. Now what if we go rook e2 though? I think we can go here. Now look at this. If he takes, we have checkmate. Check and mate with the knight on h2. Danya getting outplayed, yeah? That's checkmate. Now that wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. Unfortunately, a lot of it will remain behind the scenes. By the way, if knight takes e2, Chekaruski, knight g1, and checkmate on h2. But that is literally the tip of the iceberg. Okay. We need to unpack some of this amazingness if you guys want. We need to unpack some of this amazingness. Okay. So we all want to go right to the end. So let me walk, but let's be patient because I think there's a couple of instructive moments in the beginning. I'm on 3-3-9-1. Now, Nimzo-Indian is knight c3, bishop b4. I think a group wide. Okay, that's the Nimzo-Indian. White's other main moves are knight f3, and then the Queen's Indian is b6. And the Catalan is g3. So there's a trifecta here. A trifecta of responses to the move e6. At a club player level, knight c3 is more common. At a grandmaster level, knight f3 and g3 are more common. All three are good. I mean, and all three lead to completely different types of positions. We're not going to delve into the details. e3 is innocuous. It's not bad, but there's no need to play it immediately. Okay, so e3, knight f3. Bishop b2. He's playing okay. Just kind of passive. Castles, bishop d6. And the way that I would play this with white is probably b3. Thank you, Cash L with a prime. Thank you guys, man. All these subs are just crazy. So this is, he's relinquishing the tension and giving us everything that we want, like an ideal setup, if that makes sense. I would have gone b3 and fianchetto with the bishop, and then you get a very combative position, you know. White's super solid. Black has no problems, but it's just a position. It's a complex structure. If c5, then we simply take it. c5 blunders a pawn. That's why we put our... One of the benefits of putting a pawn on b6 is it prevents c5. Does that make sense? Sam? Yeah. So knight c3, cd, bishop d3. Repositioning the bishop. Knight b to d7. Rook e1. Rook e8, stopping e4. And queen c2. And now c5. The fun begins. Again, a6 would be fine to prevent knight b5, but I didn't want to allow e4, which potentially leads to a mass trade on e4. Now black, again, black is doing completely fine here. Takes. And now what's the typical idea in such a position? That's to play knight f6 and knight d5. The square in front of the isolated pawn is what we want to blockade, usually with a knight. Black is doing well here. Thank you, Norp007, gifting to Graph. But it's mundane. It's too vanilla. We want to keep pieces on the board. Okay. Okay. So c5. c5, adding to the central tension, and d takes c5. So again, very clearly, you guys can see at a 1400-1500 level, the difficulty that a lot of people have in keeping the tension. Right? They want clarity in the center, so that he captures on c5, which is a big positional concession, giving us more control over the center, and giving this bishop a pathway after a potential d4. That's what made all of this tactics possible. So this is very, very typical mistake at this level, and I don't mean that disparagingly, like, oh, one second, I'm just throwing away the wrappers. And I don't mean that disparagingly, but it is very common to see this. Okay, let's turn the light off. Actually, set the tone here. Okay. So what should white have done instead? This is called the hanging pawn structure, by the way. Yeah, it is called the hanging pawn structure. So what should white have done instead? Probably b3, bishop b2 would have been a better idea. Okay, so DC, BC, and now he goes b3, and now we go d4, opening up the bishop. Let the fun begin, guys. Yeah, in the dark. Are you guys ready for the fun? So our initial idea was to play bishop takes f3, rook takes e8 check, queen takes e8, g takes f3, Chekhoruskis, and king g2. But I didn't find a continuation here that was satisfactory. Which may seem crazy to you guys. You're like, wow, look at this. But it's actually not, because there's just no squares around white's king that can be accessed by any of black's pieces. We can play c takes d4, but now the knight can drop to e4. In fact, this queen could end up being vulnerable because of some sort of bishop b2 at the right moment. Whoops. So I did not mean to open this game. So having seen that, I rejected this. I considered taking with the knight on e8 to pave the way for the queen like this, but then white can intercept it with f4. Also, wasn't particularly happy with this. And so you need to often be able to take a step back and see the bigger picture and say, well, is any of this necessary? Do we need to go into these details, or can we just play it simple? And I realized that we haven't sacrificed anything yet, so we can simply recapture everything, and we'll have a huge attack. Rook takes e1, knight takes e1, cd. Now I've reconsidered. I want to turn the lights on. I feel like it's distracting. It's gonna distract people. Sorry, it's gonna distract people, and I want us to be focused on the fun tactics here. All right, so knight e2. If knight e4, we have a very pretty tactical sequence here, guys. This is instructive. You want to listen to this, trust me. Everybody wants to listen to it because this is going to be really cool. So in such a position, we need to make an observation that this knight on e1 is undefended and it's on the first rank. Everybody sees that, right? So in your mind, you should be thinking, if we put something on the e file at some point, then we're going to create a pin. But if we do that immediately, if we play queen e7 here, the issue is that white can take on f6 and it's check. So how can we modify this idea to account for that flaw? Okay, so we can consider bishop takes first and now queen e7. That's a good idea, right? We can't take the rook because of mate, but there's another flaw. What's the other flaw in the ointment here? What can white do? White can play f3, supporting the bishop. Bishop takes h7 is not an issue. We would be happy with this because we win a piece. We win a piece, guys. Bishop takes a8. Again, listen carefully. Queen takes e1 is checkmate. But the real problem is f3 preserving the bishop. So now, again, continuing our logic, we have another thing to troubleshoot, the concept that white can play f3. So how else can we attempt to orchestrate this sequence? What else can we do? What are the other candidate moves? Who can come up with another idea? Queen h4 is not possible here. Okay, but you guys are jumping the gun. Bishop takes e4 is not the only way that we could execute this particular idea. How else can we execute it? What's the other option? What's on the menu? We can play knight takes e4. We can play knight takes e4 and queen e7, right? And I think you guys might be assuming, well, didn't we just discuss this, right? White is f3. But that's where I differ. I'm going through it step by step and saying, I know that even the tiniest seemingly insignificant difference could have very important bearing tactically, because now if we look at this position very, very carefully, what move can we notice that wasn't possible in the other position with knight captures? f5, beautiful. Attacking the bishop. This is checkmate. White can try to give a queen c4 check. The king drops to h8, and this line I calculated. Now all of a sudden we might be like, wait a second, bishop takes, and oh, the queen comes and blocks on f1. But what's the final line of the sequence? Boom! Displacing the king and winning the queen. Okay. So, if bishop takes h7, we just go king h8. The knight is hanging. White needs to defend the knight. White can do that by moving the bishop to b2. And one way of exploiting this this hanging bishop would be to go queen to h4, even better than g6, just creating a devastating fork. I hope that makes sense. Anyways, Blitzkrieg, that was a complicated logical process, but just want to show you that this is all possible. None of it is crazy. It just takes a lot of sort of getting your hands dirty kind of calculation. So knight e2, we begin with rook c8, attacking the queen, improving the rook. I felt like there was no downside to this move, although it turned out that maybe there is. And now, of course, I would not go for this in one of my games. In one of my games, I would have probably preferred something more straightforward, such as activating this knight to c5, or perhaps going queen a5, attacking the knight. All of these moves would probably be winning because of the massive disparity in piece activity, but this was too fun not to pass up. Greek Gifter, knight g4. Now remember, from an earlier speedrun, 3 items on the checklist when you are evaluating a Greek gift sacrifice. Item number 1 is, do I have my 3 main pieces in place? You need to have a bishop to do the sacrifice with, a knight that could appear on g4, and a queen that could appear on h4. Now, you want to be flexible in that regard. Sometimes a Greek gift can happen with the queen on h5 or on h6 or even on c7, right? As long as the queen could have access to h2, the pieces are in place. The second checklist item is that is that you have some way of meeting king g3 or king h3, right? You don't want to assume that the king has to drop back. Here, we have many ways of meeting this. We can bring the other knight into the game. Oftentimes, the move will be queen g5. Here, that's impossible because it blunders the queen. We can go h5. The king is stuck in the center. Clearly, we have enough to keep the attack going, right? The third item on the checklist is what was missed most often. And that is the fact that you have to ask yourself, can my opponent bring the h2 square under control? Usually with the bishop that can come out to f4, sometimes with a queen move such as queen to d6. I can show you right off the top of my head a million examples of a very strong player going for a great gift sacrifice and forgetting that his opponent has some sort of way to defend that square, which was sort of hidden, and they completely missed it. Oops, I was meaning to show you, but 23-35 FIDE. This is a serious player, not somebody who's joking around. And German championship, and he goes bishop h7, boom, boom. He's accounted for this move because he's got queen to g4, but what he hasn't accounted for is queen to d3 covering the h7 square. Then the queen swings to g6 and the attack is over. The game is over because he sacked a piece. Now, this isn't like some imaginary thing. Very good players often miss these kinds of things. So those are the 3 items on the Greek gift checklist. I also wrote an article on the Greek gift a couple of years ago for chess.com. You can check it out. Hopefully that makes sense. Back to the speedrun. Now, we accounted for the 2 things. Did we account for the 3rd thing? Well, we did. And the way that we accounted for it is because we noticed that f2 is also undefended, which is generally not the case, because there's usually a rook on f1, right? That's the whole point. Or there's something defending the piece. But this is crushing, obviously. So all those items are in place. We can safely conclude that this is going to lead to a long-lasting attack. Whether or not it's sound or not, well, we don't know. Camo, thank you. Now, queen takes d4 is what we decided was a very nasty move that I had initially missed. Check, king f1, and this knight on e2 is a crucial defender, because if we give checkmate, wait a minute, that's not checkmate, he goes knight g1, and the king is not yet ready to escape on e2 because the knight on g1 will be lost. But so what can black do here to continue the attack? What is the materialistic approach for black? What would be one way of continuing here? Well, one way of continuing would be to give a check and obviously to take the knight. But if we look around the whole board, well, we might notice that now all of a sudden our knight is hanging, queen takes d7, and it seems like our attack fizzles out because this queen is simultaneously covering the square. We could try to give a rook e8 check, but that only helps white because the king goes closer and closer to the other side of the board where it's relatively safe. Bishop takes g2 here. Well, then there's knight takes g2. What's your follow-up? This check? Something like this, and then maybe slide into f1. Maybe that looks interesting. But I'm a little bit skeptical. What about rook e8 before knight h2? That would be another very good candidate move. Knight h2 is checkmate now. White has to find a way to cover the e-file so that the king still has an escape. But among other things, white can play f3 here. Very nasty move. Check, king slides up to f2. Doesn't seem like there's a good follow-up here. Black's stranded. So I think we have to act faster than that. So I don't know. I think it may very well be that white is winning here, that black has no good way to continue the attack. Because this knight is also hanging. That doesn't help my cause. You can also play a move like knight d e5 and just hope for the best, bring another piece into the attack. That's another important piece of advice for such positions, is if you sense that the attack is about to fizzle out, you don't always need to go desperado mode and give all these random checks. You can just play a move like knight d e5, bring a piece into the attack, and that doesn't require you to calculate too much, hope for the best, right? Maybe you'll take the bishop at some point. That adds to the tension, and, well, this knight was also hanging. So that's not a bad option in certain positions. So I think this would have been white's best chance. He goes knight g3, which is totally understandable covering the h1 square. So after queen h2 check, king f1, well, we can't do that because that blunders the queen. Now, I decided to bring my rook to e8, as I explained during the game, in order to prevent the king from escaping via e2. Does this move make sense to everybody? Also, it attacks the knight, which is a pretty good thing to be doing. And this is an important moment to mention that you want to be very careful about making the tempting moves when you're attacking. Sometimes the threat is stronger than its execution. And that's very true when you're attacking. You don't always want to give all the checks that you can. Sometimes you want to keep them in your back pocket. And here you're saving a tempo by going rook e8. If you give a check first, and then you decide to go rook e8, well, that could be counterproductive because you're no longer attacking the knight. So here you're forcing white to defend the knight, and then you're going to decide whether or not to give the check. Okay, so queen to d2. And now we decided to give a check. And I decided to bring the knight up to e5, which is the move that I had previously mentioned in response to queen takes d4. This is a great example of keeping the tension, of bringing another piece into the attack. Now, what were the alternatives here? Some of you were confused and thought that I had checkmate. Why not take the knight with a rook first? Well, remember, this helps white, I think, by allowing the king closer to the center. And if you give this check, remember that the king doesn't have to move in response to every check. You can simply block it with the bishop. And the attack is fizzled out. The rook is a crucial asset in the attack. Giving it away is something that I would only do if I ensured that there is checkmate. Before queen h2. Okay. And now you want to go queen h2. And you want to take, but the king escapes toward the center. I didn't see mate here. King is a very, very slippery piece. We want to be super, super careful about how we do this. No, we couldn't play it two moves before because our rook came from c8. So another idea that was proposed is h5, h4, trying to dislodge the knight so we could go queen h1. That's a phenomenal idea. I think maybe this would have been winning too. Because I don't see a way that white can defend. White's undeveloped. In the time that white takes to get the bishop out, you're already going to play h4. That would be a very interesting idea. Good way of seeing how pawns can be involved in the attack. It seems slow, but it's only two moves, and then you're already attacking the knight. So I don't know what white would have done here. But yeah, there is a sense in which perhaps it's a little too slow. But knight d5 was associated with the insane ideas I began to spot here. And to see these insane ideas, let's first consider what would have happened if white just developed the bishop to b2. Who can spot the most straightforward way to victory? Well, it's not queen g2. Queen g2 looks beautiful, but you got to adopt the business approach here and play not queen g2, but bishop g2. And after knight g2, why have we taken on g2? We've taken out the pawn. Why? Because the pawn was controlling a very important square. This knight now accesses the square, and queen g1 is completely unstoppable to my knowledge. Also, we're attacking the queen. And this is where I began to see ideas. Well, here queen h1 is checkmate. But, well, no, it's not checkmate. Checkmate in two moves. So what would be the most beautiful checkmate, though? And this will segue me into the really cool line that I saw. What other very pretty mating sequence do we have here? We can do anything we want. We can take the queen. But queen g1 and knight h2 is a very cool kind of semi-smothered mate. Right? So that would win the game very quickly. But then I saw a line that would be possible if white, let's say, moved the queen out of the way, which I don't know why he would do that. But let's say he would do that. So let's say he would do that. And I want to... Wait. So for the purposes of illustration, ladies and gentlemen, I want to show you... Just give me a second, please. Yeah. So if queen to a5, for example, then we go bishop takes g2. Knight takes g2, and now comes the beauty. Now comes the beauty. Black to play and win. And this isn't only move. I mean, at this point, you could probably go knight f3, but it's far less convincing because white can try to block the e-file and get the king evacuated. Boom! Queen g1 check. And this made me lose my mind. Maybe it's not as cool when I'm like showing it here. It was cooler in my mind. But knight f3 check, I mean, come on, this is really cool. Look at this mate. And if the king goes to f1, the knight gh2 is mate. So that's still a pretty cool mate, I gotta say. That's pretty damn sexy. So you sack the bishop, the queen, and you deliver checkmate. And if the queen goes to f4, which I actually was expecting, this I actually was expecting white to play. But at this point, you can do really anything you want. You can just take on d3 and deliver mate on g2. Yeah. This leads me to envision some scenarios where you might have a situation kind of like this. Let me make some random moves here just to set up the position, guys. So I was immediately thinking about a scenario like this. This is all completely unnecessary, but I was thinking of some crazy scenario where, like, you basically, at the end, you sack the rook. Oh, no, wrong concept. You have like a queen on b2, you distract it, and then you give mate on f2. But in any case, he goes bishop e2. And now we have a really cool draw. We had a really cool draw here, which, well, we're not interested in a draw, obviously. We could have gone check, knight f3, another sack. Now, if he moves his queen, then this is just checkmate. Black to play and draw. This is a stunning drawing sequence, but again, we're not interested in a draw, but still. Black to play and draw, guys. Who can spot it? You got this. You got this, folks. Come on. Sack on h1, queen sack. Boom. Perpetual. Perpetual with one knight against all of white's pieces. And this is a familiar idea, perhaps, to some of you. This is a common pattern. It's just a beautiful application of it. You have to sack the queen to clear space for the knight to deliver the perpetual. Very nicely done. Okay. In any case, we went d3 in order to open up the e-file. The simplest, way to understand this, right? We want the bishop to move so that the rook once again bears influence over the e-file. And well, this is completely winning for many different reasons. One of which is just to take on d3. And I suppose the fastest, I'm trying to find the fastest win here. In case I get this position against Magnus. So maybe here we should go, let's think for a second. Who can help me here? Knight c4, takes. It's actually not, I think still takes. Just bishop g2 and knight f3. No, this is winning. This is the simplest. And now it's over because we're threading this mate. And again, we could have this mate. So this is winning. Bishop g4, knight g4, and again we have control over the e-file. And now rook e2 is a very pretty move that finishes the game immediately. If he takes with the knight instead, we take this way with mate. If he takes with the queen, then what do we have here? How do we win this game? I don't think AlphaZero can defend it the end. Oh, d3 gives up the draw. Rook takes c1, though king takes 1. Maybe we don't have a win here. Maybe we don't have a win here. I wonder what the computer moves here, because it's not showing me. Well, it's not a dead draw. I wouldn't say dead draw because it's, for in human terms, it's still crazy. Maybe h5 comes in. Oh, bishop takes g4 and then queen takes d3. No, that's what he played. For me, it shows queen h4. Yeah, queen h4 makes a lot of sense too, by the way. Because you're threatening knight h2. Bishop e4. Wow. Anyways, apparently this is still a draw, but our opponent finally collapsed by developing the bishop, allowing us this interception tactic. Rook e2. Boom. Boom. Whew. So much fun stuff going on here, ladies and gentlemen. And so many mistakes, obviously. But what a game. I mean, these concepts, I think, are always so beautiful with that knight and the perpetual and the smothered mates. So the sacrifice was extremely unsound, of course, but I think it was instructive and I think it was totally worth it. With an amazing mate. We didn't get a chance to display too much of it. It remained behind the scenes, but it was a fun game nonetheless, an instructive game, and I hope you guys enjoyed that search for beauty. It just shows you something I always talk about with my friends. They say, well, isn't it an obstacle? Isn't it a big deal that now a computers on your phone can beat any human, can beat Magnus Carlsen? Doesn't that discourage you? Well, not really, because when we have these games, I know that I'm wrong on all of these counts. I'm not seeing anything here, but it doesn't diminish our search for beauty. It doesn't diminish the actual beauty of some of these concepts, and it merely enhances our ability to appreciate them. Yeah, that's definitely something. That's a great point, Transgirl Chess. I was reading in Gelfan's book that because of some line he saw in a previous move, obstructed his thoughts. So that my coach would always tell me, remember that you're playing in tournaments to win games, not to write tactics books, because I would always fall in love with some particular concept and I would try to make it work. And I knew that it didn't work, but I kept trying to make it work and kept thinking, well, if he does this, maybe it works. That's a phenomenal point. When you're playing a tournament, you want to make sure that you're being realistic. And in English essay writing, my teacher used to say, kill your darlings. That's a famous expression. Sometimes the sentences that you cling to the most are the ones that are holding you back. And it's the same with ideas. Sometimes it's that one idea you keep trying to make work. It makes you blind to the other ideas. So you got to be very mindful of that. But in this particular context, obviously we're looking for beautiful ideas and we're trying to play well. But that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. I think that's a great spot to call the speedrun today, guys. That was a super fun game. I'm really, really pumped about games like that.